Hi. You hear that music? See this puppy. You know it's time for another highly successful episode of Puppy Noir, starring Lucky as Lucky's theme song. Lucky's a tough dame from the wrong side of the tracks. She walked into my office like 4 tall furry glasses of water. She walked out, pair of aces, one-eyed judge. That's the puppy part of the show. Probably doing a good part of the show. What else? I'll let the music go. Actually, I think I should do that. Keep the theme music running. Get that kind of loud. I bet turn off the music without actually turning off the tape, because all my tech people are on holiday this week for this summer, so I have to do everything myself. This week we're gonna have a short reprise of what we've been talking about over the past few weeks. I've been kind of into the old noir stuff, and that Hammett book got me back into reading old Dashiell Hammett. I read all these books when I was like 16, and I kept mentioning The Glass Key. And I thought, well, what the hell? I've got to read The Glass Key now. I really enjoyed this when I first read it. I think it's my favorite of the Hammett novels, and it's kind of the paradigmatic. I'm sorry, I shouldn't use the word paradigmatic, but the paradigmatic Hammett character, and the character's name is Ned Beaumont, and he like most of Hammett's central characters, he has no inner life. We never hear anything this guy's thinking or feeling. Everything is through his point of view. He's just like this most remote camera lens who moves into scenes and watches things. And he acts according to a sort of set of principles, which are sort of the perfect Hammett character. He's loyal to his buddy, and he's loyal to a guy in here. I think his name's Paul, who's a kind of a political hack in some town. It's outside of New York, and he runs the local offices and the unions and everything. He's some basically a shady crook who's not as bad as some of the other guys in town. And Ned comes in. We come to a certain point in the story. It just starts in the middle of this set of kind of Machiavellian moves by Paul to keep control of the power in the area, and we never know what Ned is really up to. All we know is every time he does something, we don't know why he did it, but one thing leads to another, we realize he's done everything for his buddy Paul and for Paul's mother and for Paul's sister, because he feels a kind of kinship with his family. And the Hammett character is always true to his buddies, even if they're a little crooked. I won't say too much more than that, except that, again, I think I mentioned this when we talked briefly about it a few weeks ago. The more I think about it, I'm not a big Coen Brothers fan. They're okay. They're always different. But, every time I think of Miller's Crossing, it was basically a pastiche of The Glass Key. So if you like Miller's Crossing, you should love this. It's much better. I wanted to read a little sort of typical example of a passage from Hammett. Again, there's no interior understanding what the character's doing. We're with Ned all the time. And early in the story, he's having a bad streak of luck at the beginning of the book. And he finally wins a horse race bet. And the guy who he placed the bet with runs off with his money. So he decides to go get him. And here's the typical tough guy. The tough guy in Hammett is not the toughest guy. Here he's waiting to meet this guy in a bar where he knows he's going to show up. He ordered a double scotch. He's with a guy named Jack. Jack, another Ricky. Ned Beaumont emptied his glass as soon as it arrived. Jack let his first drink be carried away no more than half consumed and sipped at his second. Presently, Ned Beaumont had another double scotch and another, while Jack had time to finish none of his drinks. Then Bernie Despain came upstairs. Jack, watching the head of the stairs, saw the gambler put a foot on Ned Beaumont's under the table. Ned Beaumont, looking up from his empty glass, became suddenly hard and cold of eye. He put his hands flat on the table and stood up. He stepped out of the hall and faced Despain. He said, "I want my money, Bernie." The man who had come upstairs behind Despain now walked around him and struck Ned Beaumont very hard in the body with his left fist. He was not a tall man, but his shoulders were heavy and his fists were large globes. Ned Beaumont was knocked back against a stall partition. He bent forward and his knees gave, but he did not fall. He hung there for a moment. His eyes were glassy and his skin had taken on a greenish tinge. He said something nobody could have understood and went to the head of the stairs. He went down the stairs, loose-jointed, pallid, and bare-headed. He went through the downstairs dining room, to the street, and out to the curb, where he vomited. When he had vomited, he went to a taxicab that stood a dozen feet away, climbed into it, and gave the driver an address in Greenwich Village. End of chapter. There's a very violent, kind of emotional scene which most writers would have milked for all the emotional content, and the hero would have somehow come out swinging and won the. And Ned just gets slugged, and like most people get slugged by sucker punched by some guy. He just sits down, walks outside, throws up, and says, "I'm getting the hell out of here." It's a lovely series of scenes in this book, and every time Ned does something, he's doing things that look kind of like he shouldn't be doing them, but you start to trust that what he's doing is always the right thing for his friends and his family, or his proxy family. I'm having my martinis in the floral printed glass because I know Hammett would have wanted it that way. Meanwhile, I read the Diane Johnson biography of Hammett. This came out 30 years ago, and I think it got terrible press. I recall people saying it wasn't a very good biography, and I disagree. I always thought Diane Johnson was a good writer, and she's her books are definitely bathtub worthy if you ever want to read some good Diane Johnson novels. Everything I've read of hers I've enjoyed, and it's a peculiar biography, and I sort of like it. It's not one of these huge giant tomes, like you have to, like a Richard Ellman biography, which is so big you can't hardly hold it, and it's filled with bibliographical references. She does something in this. First of all, she writes really well. So when she does do expository passages, they're written like a really, really good essay or good review. And then she uses lots of documentary materials. So there'll be long passages of just letters between Hammett and the HUAC, the House of Un-American Activities Committee. Hammett spent a good number of years good number of months in jail, refusing to testify to a lot of these HUAC type clowns and these communist investigators and conspiracy mongers in Washington. And he went to jail on principles. And he did a lot of peculiar things, such as pretty much the second half of his life never wrote anymore. So after The Glass Key, he wrote The Wonderful, The Thin Man, and then he just stopped writing, largely because of this serious drinking problems, which came and went in his life. Strong political feelings and disgust with the way the world was going before and after World War II, and it seems like a man of quite interesting principles, like a Ned Beaumont character who did not wear his emotions on his sleeves. I really enjoyed this book, and it's a good bathtub biography because it's kind of it's not filled with a lot of little lit crit bullshit, but it does do a really nice job of kind of just taking you through the documentary story of Hammett's life. And I recommend it. You can't take this in the bathtub, but I found myself going back to watching this movie, The Glass Key. I don't even know who directed this. He's not one of the great directors. Stuart Heisler, I don't know anything about. I don't remember the guy's name. Screenplay by Jonathan Latimer. I should know that one. I don't remember it. This is it's not a brilliantly directed film, but it has Alan Ladd, who's kind of an interesting version of Ned Beaumont. And then it has Veronica Lake, who's very sexy in all these old movies. And Brian Donlevy as the kind of sleazy Paul, who's charming and sleazy at the same time. And the book, it follows the book very, very closely, like most of the good adaptations of Hammett do. And like a lot of Hammett movies and novels, it translates straight to the screen, like The Maltese Falcon and The Thin Man. They just go right on this. They go right onto the screen. a lot of the dialogue, and it's a lot smarter and more complicated than a lot of film noir of that period. So I think this is worth checking out and finding a copy of. It also reminded me of something I forgot to mention from there's that love. One of the many criticisms of this book, as I recall, is that he took what's the Lillian Hellman. I'm sorry, having my episodes. Lillian Hellman was the close lover and partner of Hammett during the last part of his life, and she wrote that essay, a wonderful essay at the beginning of The Big Knockover we talked about. And many people think she was a terrible liar. She just never told the truth. And many people criticized Johnson for taking a lot of Hellman's personal recollections a little too seriously. I don't know whether that's true or not. But one of the things I forgot was that at one point, Dashiell Hammett refused to talk to Lillian Hellman for like months until she admitted that Little Abner sucked. He hated Little Abner. Al Capp was one of the real right-wing, nutty, reactionary cartoonists at a time when you had all these kind of really interesting cartoons, but he was a real asshole. And Al Capp, Little Abner, and he refused to talk to Lillian Hellman until she stopped reading it. She had to stop reading Little Abner. Okay, that's our film. That's our puppy noir. I know it's. I love doing puppy noir simply because I like looking at Lucky while the Peter Gunn theme is going. I'll try not to do it anymore. All right. Happy reading. Happy bathing. We'll talk to you soon.